And this is where some high performers, like this is where they get stuck because they like that stress. They don't like the overwhelm. So every single time, every single day, they think that, okay, I'm just going to do the stress. I'm going to go up to the edge of the cliff, but I'm not going to fall over the cliff. And then, of course, they prove themselves wrong so many times. And then that's when we're in this loop, right? So this loop that you're referring to is stress, overwhelm, stress, overwhelm, rather than being able to actually spend most of our time in ventral vagal parasympathetic calm alive, and then stress, and then return to calm alive, and then stress, and then return to calm alive. That's where we want to be. And most of us, because of our past, are in this loop of stress and overwhelm. And the damage that that has created on our biology feeds that loop.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today with my guest, Dr. Aimie Apigian. Dr. Aimie is a double board certified physician in preventative and addiction medicine with master's degrees in biochemistry and public health. Beyond her foundational medical training, she is also a functional medicine physician with specialized training in autoimmunity, nutrition and genetics for addictions, mental health, mood and behavioral disorders. Her extensive training in trauma therapies include the Instinctual Trauma Response Model, Somatic Experiencing, NeuroAffective Touch and Sociometric Relational Trauma Repair have formed her knowledge and services in trauma, attachment and addiction medicine, focusing on trauma at a cellular level. Her USA Today and Amazon bestselling book, The Biology of Trauma, How the Body Holds Fear, Pain and Overwhelm and How to Heal It, is available now and will be linked in the description below. I'm looking forward to talking all things biology of trauma and how to move through and release it in today's show. Dr. Aimie, welcome to the podcast.
Amazing. Brian, I'm so excited to be here. You are doing such a great work in the world. So this is quite an honor for me.
The feeling is mutual, Aimie. What you're doing and what we're going to unpack is potentially going to be so life-changing for people in this podcast. And for jumping off, the forward in the book is from Gabor Mate, MD, and I think this gives us a beautiful introductory point. So I'm going to read his forward and then we're going to jump off into the first question. And he said, few others' works combine such as this book does: personal history, rigorous medical education, psychological penetration, scientific investigation, and clinical experience in guiding many others to healing. Dr. Aimie, I want you to talk to us about how trauma impacts our body on a cellular level and why first understanding this can offer an empowering path to whole body healing.
I think that I mistakenly thought that trauma just becomes your psychology. And so as I'm pouring everything into helping my foster adopted son and changing his perceptions, changing his beliefs, changing his behaviors, I was missing all of the underlying reason why those behaviors were there. And then when I developed my chronic health conditions, that was my turning point for realizing, wait a second, I think there's something deeper here. All of these symptoms that I'm having, the weight gain, the anxiety, the depression, the fatigue, the autoimmunity, these are all connected. And no one else is connecting the dots. So this is my job to find what is driving this. And that's where I went back to, this is trauma. This is trauma stored in the body. And unless I can figure out how to repair that cellular level, then I will continue to be impacted by the past. And I want to be free. So I guess we got to go into the biology of trauma.
Before we go deep on the biology of trauma and the cellular level, can you talk to us about the difference between stress and trauma? Because I think this confuses a lot of people, because even what you mentioned there as examples, people will associate it with stress and they will completely miss the forest from the trees that actually potentially could be trauma that's underpinning it. Can you explain the difference?
100%. And if looking back as a physician, I didn't understand the difference. So that was a big reason for me writing this book, was to just be able to pull back the curtain and show what I've learned that I didn't learn in medical school that I think is life-changing, because it has been life-changing for me. When we have a stress response, it's a very specific physiology. And I talk about a patient, Kenneth, that I had, and he was a veteran and he's lifting weights. You're nodding your head as if you've read that part of the book
Yes,
already.
I have. Yeah.
And so to get to this chase of the story, Kenneth comes into the emergency room where I'm working at the Veterans Hospital, and his bicep is in the middle of his arm. It's no longer attached to his shoulder. This is a problem. And what had happened is that he'd been lifting weights that day, and he lifted more than his capacity. And stress is something that grows us. Stressing our muscles grows our muscles. That's why we go to the gym. That's why we exercise, because we know that stress grows us. So then what's trauma? Trauma is what breaks us. Trauma is what exceeds our capacity, and it becomes more than what we can handle at that moment. And our body says, nope, we're going to disconnect, just like his muscle disconnected from the shoulder. We are going to disconnect. We're going to disconnect from our reality. We're going to disconnect from ourselves. We're going to disconnect in order to go into this freeze and shutdown that I talk about, in order to survive things that are way too much for us. Way too much for us. I also think of it as being out in the ocean and we're surfing. Now, Brian, to be honest, I am not a surfer. So when I go out into the waves, I need the itsy bitsy waves in order for me to stay within my capacity. But if I were to say, I want to ride the bigger waves, well, I need to stress myself. I need to go out and I need to practice. I need to stress myself, but stay within my capacity for growth. Because if I go out and I haven't practiced, I haven't done that development of my capacity, I'm going to be faced with a large wave and I'm going to be overwhelmed. I'm going to be drowned by the wave, just like we can be drowned by our emotions in a situation. And that's what breaks us, is the internal experience and the emotions that they create.
Capacity is a word I use frequently on this podcast for a whole host of reasons. I learned it through therapy, through somatic therapy in particular, because capacity, which I didn't understand a decade ago that I understand now, shrinks and increases depending on a whole host of factors. If you're going through grief, you're going through a breakup, you're going through a job loss, capacity tends to shrink. Life is going good and you feel like you're running downhill or you're surfing a great wave, then capacity increases. I had David Kessler on my podcast. He's one of the world's leading experts in grief, and he speaks about bullseyes and going in at the eye of the storm. So buffalo in the storm go in towards the storm so that they're in it quicker, but they're out of it quicker, versus a lot of, cattle that run away from it. When it comes to capacity and dealing with trauma, what is the consideration for moving into the bullseye? Is it a case of evaluating where we are currently, how much current capacity we have, because we know there's this trauma over here, elephant in the room, thing that we're ignoring, detaching, numbing out from, but we want to work through it? What is the consideration for moving into that bullseye? Is it slow and steady? Is it going hard because you feel like you have the capacity? Is it going hard and then scaling back accordingly? Or is it very much a case by case dependent situation?
Oh, what a great question, Brian. So I'm going to ask you a question now. If you don't know how to swim, would you like me to throw you into the pool? Or would you like to start in just wading in the pool with me? Which one would you prefer?
Yeah, definitely bit by bit. Yeah.
Why?
Do you know what? Interestingly enough, I have to answer this from two different forms of life, Aimie,
Yeah,
because I feel like it actually probably covers the majority of people listening to this podcast. In my 20s, I was throw me in the pool and I will figure out how to swim. I will
Yep.
figure it out. I will paddle. I will figure it out. I'll paddle until I figure it out. Now in my 30s, in a few years coming into my 40s, I like to take a bit by bit approach, because I find that process allows me to, it's the famous Aristotle quote that the goal of action is contemplation, that I'm able to take a step, contemplate, figure if this is the right step, and continuously move forward. So that's evolved and changed. So at this stage of life and season of life, I would do it bit by bit. But we have this conversation 10, 15 years ago, I'm like, throw me in the pool.
Which I think a lot of people are. And that, I think, is what we're taught to do. We're taught, we even have a saying, feel the fear and, face it and do it anyway. And when it comes to trauma therapy, it is like jumping into a pool. If you don't know how to swim yet, let's not do that, because your body is going to interpret that as a life threat. So not only are you trying to open things up, but you're doing it under life-threatening circumstances. So if you know how to swim, well, then jump in. Don't hold back. Jump in, because you know how to swim. But most people, including myself, we weren't taught how to swim the waves of emotions. And so we get into something deeper than what we can handle. And rather than ride the wave, we get drowned by the wave. And one thing that I had to learn is that there is no growth in overwhelm. So why am I going to continue to put myself in situations where my body gets overwhelmed if there's no growth in that? And so being able to pause and contemplate, as you're saying, is one of the critical skills that a person needs to have, to know, how deep do I go? What is the safe amount for me right now, today? And that's what most people are not doing, Brian. Would you agree? Most people are not doing that pausing and that contemplating to make wise decisions based on their capacity.
I agree completely. And I can't talk because 10 years ago, that was me. I was, here's my problem. Here are my issues. Fix me. Like whether it was a therapist or books I was reading or courses I was doing or practices I was applying, I was like, okay, here's the problem I want to be fixed. And sometimes, again, just to give people a little bit of a mindful approach to this, that if you go all in, like swimming in the pool, as you mentioned, Dr. Aimie, it becomes too overwhelming. And as you mentioned, there's no growth in that. And then I found it wasn't one step back or two steps back, it was 20 steps back.
Right there. 20 steps back.
So with that in mind of the overwhelm, and it's what I love so much about the book, because there's so much in here. It opens with the universal steps of body's instinctual trauma response. So it goes from there and it builds. With those who are, let's paint a picture for the average person listening. They know that there's trauma somewhere. People listening to this podcast will be very familiar with trauma. Big T trauma, little t trauma. Nobody goes through life unscathed, whether it's through childhood, teenage years, or life in general, based on what we've picked up. But they don't know where to start. Or they've started and they don't know how to go to the next level. Because I find once you kind of get to level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is easier. It's the 0 to 1 and 1 to 2 that are very, very difficult. Where would you advise people start to consider, outside of obviously reading the book, which they can get off the back of this, listening to this podcast, which will give them a lot of emotional literacy, a lot of the emotional language that will help them move through things. But for those that are listening now currently, where would you recommend they start?
What a great question. Where do we start? And are we wanting to talk about an acute trauma response, or are we wanting to talk about chronic? Because those are actually very different, Brian.
Can you explain the difference between the two?
Would love to. Thanks for asking. Isn't it weird that I find exciting, like, to talk about trauma?
I love it. This is so in my wheelhouse. As uncomfortable it is when you're actually going through it, it's something that it's like exercise. You get kind of addicted to the endorphin release, and trauma is similar, pain being the path to freedom and all that. But sorry, Dr. Aimie, go ahead.
No, this is two geeks geeking out about trauma. So the acute trauma is a time when we are actively in a response. And so we've moved through those 5 steps, and the trauma state is both the freeze and the shutdown. So steps 4 and steps 5. Now, here's what people need to know about an acute response. When we don't know how to complete it, when we don't know how to finish that wave, if you want to call it a wave, then that's when the body holds on to it. So I was talking to a dad the other week, and he was concerned about his college-age son who had been present and just feet away from a shooting and had watched the person die. He says that when he finally saw his son had a facial expression of shock, and he'd never seen his son look like this before. He's wanting his son to talk about it. He's wanting to take his son to therapy. He's asking me, what do I do? And his son has decided to spend more time exercising. He's now riding his bike 5 hours a day. He's now in the gym an additional 2 hours a day. He's channeling all of this acute shock into exercise, which again, I'm sure if we talked about your past, Brian, this is what you and I both used to do. And when that's what we do, that's then how the body says, well, I'm not getting what I need to return to a sense of safety. And that's why it holds on to these experiences. So if we're talking about an acute response, I or someone with me has just gone into this place where they were shocked or stunned and their body froze and then shut down. We need to be able to help that body return to a sense of safety now in order to be able to not have the body hold on to it, because that's what then makes us sick later on. But most of the people that I work with, their bodies have been holding on to this for decades. By the time you're in your 30s, 40s, your body's been holding on to this stuff for decades. So we're no longer talking about an acute response. We're talking about something that's become chronic. And when I first started developing my health symptoms, I was in my early 30s and I didn't know if repair was possible. I was asking the question, is it too late? Is it too late once my body has been holding on to this for decades and now I'm getting sick from it? Is there any hope? And I honestly didn't know. So that's why I went deep into my study of the nervous system, of trauma, and that's where I discovered what I'm now calling the biology of trauma, where it's this integration of all these pieces that you need. So coming back to, well, then where do we start? If we're talking now about chronic, this is most of the world, where do we even start? And in section 3, I lay out the phases of the healing journey. And so we get to be able to see which phase am I in so that this is what I need to be doing right now. And I can save the rest for the later phase when that's when I'm supposed to do that. One of the first things that I have to tell people is you got to get out of the story. And they're like, what? Like my story is who I am. And I'm like, that's exactly the problem right there. Your story has become who you are. You're holding on to your story as your identity, perhaps as your justification for why you are the way you are. So the very first step is learning to shift our nervous system state. You know from chapter 2 that there are 3 states of our nervous system. I liken it to a car. I drive a little sports car, so I liken it to a car. And if you don't know how to shift those gears, that is where you start when you're learning how to drive a car. You're not going to learn how to fix the engine or change the oil. That's not where you start. If you're going to drive a car, you need to learn how to shift the gears. And that's what we need to learn with our own nervous system. And until a person knows how to shift those gears, how to notice like, oh, I'm in stress right now and it's not serving me to be in stress mode right now, or I'm in overwhelm and it's not serving me to be in overwhelm. Well, then I want to learn how to shift those gears so that I can get to what I call calm aliveness, parasympathetic, ventral vagal, whatever your favorite terminology is, it's all the same thing. But until we know how to shift that, it's not safer to go on that long drive out to the beach, up to the mountains, because you don't even know how to shift your gears. And you're going to be ruining your transmission. You're going to be trying to do this whole drive either in gear, whatever gear you're in, whether you're in gear 5, gear 1, whatever gear that is your default gear, until you know how to shift your gears, that's where you're stuck doing all of life. And so do not start with your story. Do not start with trying to process your childhood or process something that's happened. That's a later phase. The first phase is learning your nervous system, learning to understand it, track it, and shift it. So it's not just the mind-body connection, Brian, right? It's not just the connecting. You gotta, it's not just putting your hand on the stick shift. You've got to learn how to shift the gears. And so we've got to learn how to respond and actually shift our nervous system, not just connect with our body.
This is a bit of a left field question, but I think it ties in well. I would consider myself a rehabilitated type A. Very go, workaholic tendencies, overtraining tendencies, more. I've done a lot of work over the last few years to
Are you
try and
sure you and I are brother and sister?
soul brother and sister. We're definitely Dr. Aimie. But there's a lot of people listening who are still stuck in this. And I'm just curious, and this might be focus group of one based on my experience and what I see on a daily basis. You mentioned the gears there, and I think about fifth gear. I felt like I lived life in fifth gear. Everything was just more, go, faster. And what I didn't understand, even 5 or 6 years ago, not even a decade ago, was that I couldn't sit with negative emotions. I couldn't even sit with positive emotions. I was nearly emotionally dyslexic because I couldn't interpret which ones I was feeling. There was just confusion, and then I would go work more, or I would train more, or I would do something that got out of that having discomfort of, I don't know what's coming up, I don't want to feel it, move on. For people that are listening, is that a common trauma response for people with over-exercising tendencies, workaholic tendencies, distraction tendencies, even if it's seen outwardly, culturally as quote-unquote productive and societal progression, but in reality, and I don't want to label everybody with the same brush or tar them with the same brush, but for people that are listening who are like, oh, that's me. I over-exercise a lot because of something that's gone on in the past that I'm not willing to deal with, or I have workaholic tendencies. Is that something that you see commonly, or is this just something that I've seen in my world?
This is what I see very commonly, and I see that those who are driving themselves are the ones who are holding more trauma than those who aren't. Your high performers are actually holding more trauma. And yet they're asking, but why? I can function so much better than the others. I can do so much more. But it's the energy that it's taking to stuff other things down in order to operate at that high level. And wow, like how amazing your body has been so far to be able to stuff that down and allow you to function at this high level. It is coming at a cost, and eventually you will need to pay that credit card bill. It is coming in the mail. It may not have come yet, but don't think that you can charge the credit card and never pay the bill.
That's a beautiful metaphor. That hit me in real time. That spoke to definitely. I feel like that was a line I needed a while back. That again is just bringing me back in alignment again as we speak in real time. The critical line, our critical line. You talked about capacity, but there's also neuroception and the gap. Can you talk to us a little bit about how they interconnect's not the correct word, but how they tie together?
Our body runs this background calculation. Many people think that it's their mind and they make logical choices. Not really. It's your body, your autonomic nervous system specifically. And it runs this background calculation all the time, even when you're asleep. And it's calculating how in danger am I versus how much in safety am I. So it's collecting all this information. It has a dashboard. And on this dashboard has everything from your external environment, the temperature, the people, what you're seeing, what you're smelling, all of this. This is all information that's coming into this dashboard, getting plugged into this equation, but it's also your internal environment, your blood chemistry, your toxin load, what you ate for breakfast, your serotonin levels, all of these things that we can't control, those are also being plugged into this background equation for this dashboard. And so at every given moment, our nervous system is saying, well, if this is the amount of danger I'm in, or if this is the amount of safety I'm in, then this is how I need to be right now in the world. And when we look at our capacity, then it's measuring the demands against us, or if you want to call it danger, demands, responsibilities, challenge. And it's measuring that up against our capacity because that's what it needs to know. How do I need to be right now? Do I need to be stressed? Do I need to just shut down and overwhelm? Do I need to be in calm, alive, and creative and connected? What's the best way for me to be right now? And it's basing that on this background calculation of what's up against me and do I have what it takes? And when I don't have what it takes, then my nervous system makes the decision for me to shift how I am right now in the moment. If I do have what it takes, well, then my nervous system also makes those adjustments and says, great, well, then let's go. Let's go because we've got this challenge and we can overcome this challenge and we can accomplish something great. And so our nervous system is responding to this demand versus capacity. Going back to my patient Kenneth, that's exactly what happened. Demand, lifting 80 pounds. Okay, 80 pounds. What's 80 pounds in the UK?
About 40 kilos.
Okay, so we should probably double that. Let's make it 80 kilos. 80 kilos is the demand on us, and his capacity that day was not 80 kilos. And when it's not going to measure up, that's when our body says, it's better for me to disconnect to survive this. And so we disconnect, and there are these 3 survival mechanisms that our body shifts into to survive what feels like an inescapable life threat. But then, of course, here's the crazy thing, Brian, is that someone can give us a bad look or a look that we perceive as, ooh, they disapprove of me. And we interpret that as an inescapable life threat. And it was just a look. But that's the filter that we have from our life and specifically from our attachment. So we're creating inescapable life threats all the time, which is why our body's responding to that and being like, well, okay, if I'm in an inescapable life threat, well, then this is what I know to do when I'm facing an inescapable life threat. And we don't realize that that's just how our body is going to respond when this is what we perceive. Our responses are not based on reality. They're based on our perceptions of the demand against us and our capacity to overcome that demand.
That reminds me so much of attachment theory within relationships and trauma tingles, when you'll have people in terms of, I had a great podcast with Dr. Louise Carroll. She's a psychotherapist here that specializes in relationships. And she spoke about, are you feeling trauma tingles or are they the one? Is one of her famous questions, where sometimes we seek what's familiar to us versus what's good for us. And that comes back to that danger and safety you mentioned. If you had a feeling of unsafety or lack of safety and danger within childhood or teenage years, you're going to potentially present forward in relationships looking for something that's familiar, not because it's good for you, but because it's familiar. And those trauma tingles are they're a check-in, which I find very interesting. But on that note, and the book goes through this so people can go a lot deeper on why the body holds on to trauma. It's in section 2 of the book. But you mentioned earlier about getting stuck in the loop, and I want to ask the question because I have foundational knowledge on this, but this isn't my area of expertise, that sometimes we have to close the trauma loop, because if we had it in childhood or teenage years, we didn't have the capacity, or the language I've used in the past is I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the hammer, screwdriver, the nail. I didn't have the tools to move through difficult situations in earlier life. And as a result, the loop never got closed, or it got cut short, and then that trauma got stored. Is that what's happening in the formation in terms of the biology of trauma for people?
Yeah, this loop. And many people can relate to living either in stress or in overwhelm. And especially for your audience who like to push themselves, they flirt with that edge all the time, Brian. They like to be right at that edge. You're laughing as if like
it speaks to, it's so me. Like I still have to meditate regularly to not go to that peak of overwhelm because it's so familiar. It's why I'm laughing. Just apologies to cut across, but just in real time, I'm like, oh, I still have to manage that, Aimie.
Well, this is the incredible thing that we get to learn about ourselves is, why do I do that? Oh, because it's familiar. Just like what you've said, it's familiar. My body has gotten so used to stress that it doesn't feel right. I don't feel alive unless I'm stressed. And so we intentionally put ourselves right at that edge, and we know that adrenaline gives us that edge. And so we do things that will give us that adrenaline. That sometimes means drinking coffee on an empty stomach. That sometimes means creating a deadline for ourselves because we know that we do better under pressure. And it's just a matter of then like, well, how much pressure? Because we know that if it's too much pressure, I mean, we completely shut down, right? And it's the 20 steps back where it takes a long time to get back to that place where I'm like, okay, I can dig back in. But we love that feeling of being our best so much that we want to be right at that edge where we feel our best, not realizing that right next to us is this cliff. And when we fall over the cliff, we have many steps backwards. But we love being right at that cliff edge. We love it. And so part of that healing journey is changing that aspect of ourselves. And this is where some high performers, like this is where they get stuck because they like that stress. They don't like the overwhelm. So every single time, every single day, they think that, okay, I'm just going to do the stress. I'm going to go up to the edge of the cliff, but I'm not going to fall over the cliff. And then, of course, they prove themselves wrong so many times. And then that's when we're in this loop, right? So this loop that you're referring to is stress, overwhelm, stress, overwhelm, rather than being able to actually spend most of our time in ventral vagal parasympathetic calm alive and then stress and then return to calm alive, and then stress, and then return to calm alive. That's where we want to be. And most of us, because of our past, are in this loop of stress and overwhelm. And the damage that that has created on our biology feeds that loop. It literally has created biology that now stresses us out. The inflammation stresses our nervous system out. The oxidative stress, well, that's clear in the name. It's stress for our body. The nutrient deficiencies, we're often running on magnesium deficiency, vitamin D deficiency, vitamin B deficiency, just because when we are in that high stress zone that we love to be in, we are burning through those nutrients. It's like burning through the fuel of our car when we're driving with our accelerator pushed all the way down to the floor. We're burning through fuel faster, but we're not stopping to fill up the tank.
It's interesting that you use the word healing journey and not healing destination because
Have you arrived yet?
I have not arrived. And one of my misconceptions was that I thought when I would start this journey that there would eventually be a destination. And
Yeah.
I found, and again, in my 37, nearly 38 years of life, I haven't got there yet, maybe in double the time, possibly. But what the reason I bring it up is because type A's, especially people who have their own businesses, big into fitness, we have outcome driven goals normally, targets, financial targets, fitness targets, life targets, relationship targets. We've outcome driven goals, which is ironic because nearly everything in life is process driven. It's that famous Buddha quote, how do you expect to be happy at a destination if you're not happy on the journey? Healing is a lot like that. And I had to completely reframe the story that healing was an outcome, that healing was the destination. Healing is actually part of the journey, because part of the journey is sometimes you go off track. It's not a straight line. Sometimes you go and you take a side route, you take a wrong turn, you go left when you should have gone right, your Google Maps didn't work, or whatever your emotional equivalent of your Google Maps is. And it's not beating yourself up and living in the story of, oh, I can never get this right. It's just that you've created, as you said, this link between behavior that's tying back to your biology, which is feeding back into your behavior, and it becomes this negative loop. So on that, and I know the book goes through this, particularly in the third section about how the body heals, for someone that wants to bring themselves into that calm alive, and the language I've always used predominantly prior to reading the book was peace, just being in a place of peace, love and gratitude. They're the three anchor higher vibrational frequencies I try and live my life at. I don't always do it, but the aspiration is to live with those higher levels of frequency. For those who are listening who want to be in a more calm alive state, and they want to make it, if not their new normal, at least something they can tap into, what would you recommend? Because the book goes through the map and the framework for the journey of healing, how to start with safety, and then the support and the internal chemistry of dysregulation, and it goes through all of it. So the roadmap is there, but just to give people a taster of that, in terms of how the body heals, how would we make Cam Alive our new normal potentially, or something that we can visit frequently?
I am looking at my book in chapter 18. I know you're not there yet in the book, so I'm going to give you a little taste again. Have you look forward to getting to this last chapter. In many ways, true expansion is like stepping onto a spiral staircase. And whether we're taking that first step onto a spiral staircase or no, we've done several steps and we're looking to take the next step onto that spiral staircase. Either way, we are stepping onto something that allows us to go deeper with every round of that spiral staircase. So it's not that we're going to start with our childhood and be able to be done with our childhood and then we move on to another area of our life. It's I do this layer and it's going to be a layer of, yes, it has threads all the way to my childhood. It has threads to this. It has threads to that. And I can think that I'm done with it. And then something else happens, Brian. I'm sure that this has never happened to you. But for me, where I get a trigger and I'm like, oh, I've got some deeper work to do. I thought I was done with that attachment and security stuff. Apparently there's another layer. So it's the layers. And that's where for each person, no matter where they are, there is the next layer. If you are just literally starting out, well, then you're at the first layer. Congratulations. And when we do that work to bring in peace, love, and gratitude and to set our intention for this is how I want my day today to be, well, then what am I doing? Because whatever I do today will help me have a better tomorrow. And then whatever I do tomorrow will help me have a better day the next day so that I see it just as this progressive step by step. I don't need to take the whole mountain at a time. I'm just taking the next best step today for me to move towards peace, love, and gratitude. What's my next step today? I can't worry about tomorrow because I don't know yet what today will be. Maybe today I will go into overwhelm and then tomorrow I'll be tending to my body to help bring it back to a sense of safety. I don't know. And so that's the piece though, right? Is the piece is I only have to worry about today and what is my next best step today for moving towards what I want.
A couple of things there, beautiful, and I laugh at the triggers and activations. One of my internal check-ins has always been, if my response is hysterical, it's normally historical. So I know if I'm disproportionately reacting to something, I need to check in with that activation. I had Peter Crone on the podcast recently, and he had a great line that triggers and activations are showing you where you're not free in life, which has become a new brain tattoo for me as well, because it allows you to work through the layers like an onion. You talked about the next best steps there. Just out of curiosity, Aimie, and I know this will be different for everybody, but do you find that there's a framework, isn't the right word, but the next best steps, is that a, for example, terrible analogy, and apologies for going down the gym route, but as a gym bro, I've reformed gym bro as well, alongside my type A, I've had a lot of work I've had to do over the last few years, as you can
I
probably
understand
tell.
it's familiar for you, so we're going to allow that safety for your nervous system.
Yeah, appreciate it. If somebody says to me, I want stronger legs, I'm like, squat, lunge, leg press. So that's the tool, that's the formula. It rarely changes, although there might be tweaks within, the biomechanics of an individual. For someone that's getting a trigger or an activation, and they're aware that it's a trauma response from some shape or form in life, past experience with a parent, past experience with a loved one, past experience with a brother or sister, teacher, adult, big T trauma, little T trauma. I don't want to go too much into the specifics because this is a very wide varying issue that people can deal with. But is the next best step a lunge, squat, or leg press, for example, or is it a multitude of things depending on the individual?
Mm. Yeah, so I've been able to be quite proud of how much I can leg press. How much can you leg press?
like I've got small little tiny legs. I don't have to go very far, so I can leg press quite a lot. I've got little hobbit legs, so it's it doesn't have very far to travel. So I feel it's although the weight is very heavy that I can, it's down to mechanics and leg length and liver length versus anything else. So again, probably doesn't answer the question, but a lot.
All right. So we're going to assume that if we go to the gym together, I'm going to win in the leg press.
100%.
100%. I feel better already about myself. Thank you, Brian. Now, I come in one day though, and I'm sick with the flu. But I, being Aimie, I'm still going to try to prove that I'm stronger than Brian. Now, as a good friend, you are going to say, no, like I'm just not even going to compete with you today because your capacity is not there. You're going to get hurt if you're trying to do the squats, the leg press, the lunges when you are sick with the flu. When we have gone into overwhelm, that's the same thing as our body being sick with the flu. That is not the time to be like, okay, let's do this. It is the time to rest. It is the time to say the best thing for my body right now is to return to a sense of safety. I've lost that. Let me hydrate. Let me rest. Let me just focus on getting my body back to a sense of safety, of calm, of aliveness. And then we can talk about going back to the gym and doing all of those things and having it be something that's growth and having it be fun. And so that is what we need to start kind of having that perspective when we sense that our body has lost its sense of safety. There's either two ways. One, it's spiraling out of control and it's in the stress response. And the other is, no, it's thrown on the emergency brake. It's stuck at the side of the road with a flat tire and empty gas tank. And that's the shutdown. If it's spiraling out of control, we need to stop the spiral. If we're stuck on the side of the road, well, then we need to just wait and get gas in the tank and be able to learn how to fix our tire. Not try to be in the driver's seat, pushing on the accelerator and being like, why won't this car go? So again, just coming back to this idea that so many people are living so disconnected from their own bodies, Brian, that they don't even know when they're spiraling out of control. They don't know when their body has thrown on the emergency brake. And now's not the right time to be pushing the accelerator. And so until we know that, that's actually where to start. Learn your own inner states. Learn to track your nervous system so that when you have these pauses throughout the day that you've been referring to, you can know, where's my body at? Where's my capacity at? So what does my body need right now? What is my next best step right now?
That's a beautiful message. And I mentioned at the top of the podcast about the emotional literacy, and going through the book, that's what you're going to be arming yourself with, because I tend to default, although I'm a big believer, and I know you do a lot with somatic work in terms of intuitive with the body, releasing emotions physically, of course, but I've historically always been a very rational, logical thinker, and sometimes I need to wrap my head around something logically before I can check in emotionally or somatically to what's going on in my body. And I think people that are listening to this podcast will be the same. So I'm going to link the book in the description below. I'm going to link the website, the social media channels, Instagram, all of that good stuff. And I just have one final question that I want to get into around safety, because this is going to be a very foreign feeling and concept to some. And thankfully for others, it's going to be more normal, and they just need to learn to tap back into it. But before I get into that final question, Aimie, is the book, Instagram, the website, the best place to send people, or is there anywhere else you'd like to send them before I get into that final question?
They can come find me at biologyoftrauma.com. That's where they can also find the book. Though over in the UK, I would assume that something like Amazon over in the UK would be the best place. And really look forward to connecting with them. So find me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, wherever they hang out. Would love to hear from them.
Amazing. The last question, the sense of safety. And I have to use a story, and I have to use myself as an example here, because otherwise it's very difficult to frame the question or frame what message I'm trying to put across. The sense of safety, we talked about danger and safety earlier. a sense of safety is what I would call a very foreign concept. It's like going to Germany and trying to speak Japanese. I wasn't able to feel that sense of safety. That was just not a default feeling for me. And it took me years of therapy, plant medicine experiences, meditation and journaling and reflection, somatic therapy, everything to try and get proficient in basic emotional literacy that I'm like, oh, this is what feeling safe is like. And for me, it ultimately came down to I was very close to my grandmother when she was alive, and my grandmother was always my safety net. My mum was amazing, my biggest fan. My father, I have a great relationship now, but quite a tumultuous time for most of our early life. But my grandmother was always my safety. She was my rock. And until I was able to meditate and bring myself back into her presence and feel that, and then take it into current day, I wasn't able to feel that sense of safety. For people that are listening, where either danger, overwhelm, excessive stress is their default, and safety is the reservoir that they're trying to get to, but they don't know how, what would you recommend? And again, I've used my example, and I'm sure there's a million different ways to get to that sense of safety. But for those who struggle with it, where would you suggest they look into, or what would you suggest they do so that that becomes a place they can visit regularly?
And I love that, visit regularly. It is a place that we need to find, and I'm going to suggest that it's even a place that we need to create, not wait for someone else to bring it to us. We can learn to create it. And what I see most people doing is mistaking safety for relief. They're seeking relief, which, given the skills and the tools that they have, ends up being an escape. And that's not safety. It feels safer because you've escaped something and provided momentary relief from something, but let's not confuse that with true sense of safety. And this is why so many people will grab an alcoholic drink, especially if they're going out to a social, right? Like they don't think anything of it. They don't realize that maybe there's a little bit of anxiety there around other people, and it's providing them relief, providing them escape. It's not providing them a sense of safety. That's different. A safety is where I don't need to be anybody other than my true self. It's safe to show up authentically. It's safe to feel. It's safe to have emotions. That's what true safety is. True safety is where it feels so safe that I can tell my secrets so that they're not secrets anymore. That's what safety is. And it starts with us learning to create that for ourselves. And as you say, this sense can be so foreign to us that it actually feels dangerous. Safety can feel dangerous. And this is for every person listening who realizes that when they go to relax, they have to have something to help them relax, because their body can't relax on its own because it doesn't feel safe to relax. So they actually have to numb the feeling of fear that comes up with relaxation. Why would we be afraid of relaxing? Because relaxing means softening. And a softening means my sadness is going to surface and fill up that space. Softening means you might see my true authentic heart and really how tender it is, not the tough, strong Aimie that I like you to see. Softening means my guard is down. And when I've been programmed to believe that the next bad thing is always just around the corner, it's not safe for me to be relaxed. I have to be on guard. And so creating safety then really has to start with micro moments of safety. In my courses, I start people with 20 seconds. For some of them, that's even too long. And we've got to shorten that to 3 seconds, 5 seconds. And then we intentionally pull ourselves out, put ourselves back to where we're comfortable with having some stress, because our body actually has to adapt and get used to and see that when I had 3 seconds of feeling safe, nothing bad happened. Because then the next time it's going to feel okay with me saying, we're going to do this for 5 seconds. Okay, that's stressful, but if nothing bad happened with 3 seconds, then I think I can do 5 seconds. And that's how we grow our capacity for even feeling safe.
That's very powerful, Amy. That's a section I think I'm going to clip up separately as well, because that's going to help so many people. That hit me in real time as well. I actually need to meditate and process and digest on that as well. You were doing tremendous work. I'm so grateful for this conversation. The amount of stuff that's came up and is processing in real time, it's been an unlock for me. I know it's going to be the same for people listening. And if you got the same release or the same aha moments and you think you've got any family members or friends that would benefit, please share it with them. The book, I can't recommend enough. As I said, I'm working through it. I'm onto section 3, so I'll be working through how the body heals, and it's just a wonderful, I'll say a wonderful read. It's difficult in sections because it illuminates part and the activations that show you where you need to be free, but that's where you need to potentially unpack the layer. So for those of you who go through it and have a similar experience, that's actually the message back to you. That's the mirror on, this is what you need to look at. This is the layer that's ready to be healed, that's coming up to be healed. Amy, keep doing the tremendous work that you're doing. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. And anything I could ever do to help, just give me a shout. And thank you so much again.
Thank you, Brian.
That was Dr. Aimie Apigian on the biology of trauma, how the body holds fear, pain, and overwhelm, and how to heal it. I hope you got as much from this podcast as I did. I loved this one. This is one I'm going to be saving and going back on a few times. A lot of real-time processing. The last section, particularly on the sense of safety, really had resonated and hit home with me. So I'm going to be writing about that in my top 3 takeaway newsletter, which you can subscribe to on the website if you head over to the website, or the link in my Instagram bio for my top 3 takeaways from that week's podcast. And this will be no different, coming out on Thursday, but it also has all the links, all the timestamps, main sound bites from the episode, and then all the other cool stuff that I'm doing. Again, is at the bottom of that email, so you can subscribe to that. And if you did enjoy today's show, please leave a rating and a review. It helps massively with the growth of the show and allows me to bring on other great guests in all different topics, from health, wellness, and trauma in the case of today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Catch you next Monday.